Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of SDRescue. We're currently on episode 38. I am Grayson Fulbright, and joined with me is actually AJ Alonso, one of the co-founders of SD Revolution. Austin Fuller is out today, won't be joining us, but I think the email that we're going to be checking out is going to be a really awesome opportunity between myself and AJ for two reasons. One, AJ and I are in similar spaces. And we're going to be looking at an email today, diving into somebody trying to offer outsourced lead generation and B2B sales services to me. I'm the one that got the email. The second reason why I really am excited about this episode is because I think both AJ and myself have different perspectives on kind of how to sell in this space. So without further ado, I'm done talking for the next little minute. AJ, how you doing today?
I'm good, Grayson. I'm excited to be here. I rarely get to guest on these episodes. I'm usually in the background just helping produce. But every once in a while, I've got strong opinions that I want to shout out to the people. And this episode is going to be a good one, like you said. Emails that we are both very familiar sending and receiving. So I'm excited to dive into this bad boy.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started here. And for context, this was a first email that I was sent. So I've gotten additional emails from this person, and we might check them out in a later episode. But so far, this was first email that this person sent to me. I'm going to go ahead and read it through. Hi, Grayson. Thought we'd be an asset for you and wanted to find time to talk. We've been sourcing new clients for reputable advertising and marketing businesses for over 5 years now. Our clients typically close 25% of the deals we source, meaning substantial ROI. We used to work with public and high growth venture-backed companies like this brand, etc. But now we give those strategies to smaller firms looking for sales momentum. There's nothing fancy here. We put sales calls on your calendar. 70% of the calls we book result in a pricing discussion. So these are real and hot leads. We've landed our clients deals with companies like this logo, and this logo. There's a lot to it, but if you'd welcome a partner who can source deals that turn into dollars, we should sync up.
Wow. I can give some initial thoughts before we kind of pick it apart a little bit. As you can see in the color coding here, you've got a ton of brand seller information in here. I think they did an okay job, is what I'll call it, at social proof. I think they overly tried to social proof this message. You can see that they've been in business for over 5 years. They typically close 25% of the deals. They talk about ROI, but never mention any numbers. They even drop in some brands that they work with and then go as far to talk about some of the deals that they've actually sourced for clients. It's almost like they're trying, in my opinion, a little too hard to tell you, Grayson, the recipient of this email, that they know what they're doing and you should trust them. Social proof's obviously really valuable, but I think it's better when it's sprinkled in strategically rather than sort of the main focus of the message. And to this was just like a big slap in the face of like, look at us, we're good, we know what we're doing, please work with us. Sort of the initial vibe that I got from the message.
Yeah, I agree. I think it boils down, in my eyes, to the magic bullet problem, where they're trying to almost compact most or all of their sales process into one email, to where it's like they're kind of idealizing, checking all the boxes for the person reading this email, so that by the time that they get to the last email, not only are they responding to get on a call, they're already, quote, warmed up and ready to buy. And I think that kind of bleeds through in the way that it's written. And another thing that I wanted to point out, and this is where I really think this messes up, because while it's got good copy, it's well structured, it's highlighting interesting benefits and things that might be relevant. I think what it fails to do is to wrap the recipient into the conversation.
Yep.
I talk about this a lot, or I've talked about this a lot in past episodes, but I haven't really explained myself. But when I say that you come off as if you're talking to yourself, what I mean by that is, when you're sending an email, it's an email that's coming from one person to be read by another person. It's a conversation. It's digital, but it's still a conversation. And usually there's, a topic or a subject, but there's two people involved in looking at the subject. And that environment is kind of hard to either mimic or create when you're doing cold outreach, because it's like, hey, I don't know you. Hey, this isn't a conversation I necessarily signed up for. And so there's this balance between talking about yourself and why you're reaching out and why this email is even relevant in the first place. But then there's the other side of it of like, why me specifically? Why not someone else at my organization? Why do I need to read this now? Why are you reaching out about this specific thing? Why do you think you have the social capital to get this information from me? And what I think this email kind of fails to do is wrap the recipient into the message. At the very beginning, he leads with an assumption by saying, hey, thought we'd be an asset for you. Then a barf of a bunch of product language and a bunch of value prop and a bunch of marketing language. And then at the very end, the person wraps back around to the recipient. And what that can cause people to do is really feel like you are disconnected from them from the get-go. Like it's very easy, I think, as a buyer to kind of pick up on when you're getting either thrown something automated, thrown something with no care, or thrown something with like a misinformed message. And what you don't want to do is put yourself in a position to where they no longer want to receive any emails from you. If you put too much into an email, if you are too one-sided and don't actually make it a conversation, you can blow your shot to future conversations.
For sure. Yeah, I think to your point, what they've done, and this is a common sin, I guess I could call it, in a lot of cold emails in this vein, is that they've taken what I can basically find on their website, slapped it into an email, and then hopes that it just resonates with me. And I think we've talked about it on the show in the past, but really your goal is to sort of bridge that gap between what you're telling somebody and the whys that you're talking about. Why should I care about this? Why me? Why now? We call it like being the delta between what somebody should know about your product and what they can already find about your product online, like bridging that gap between the two to paint them that picture of like, hey, this is why you should be talking to me. This is why it matters. And in this situation, the person sending the email didn't necessarily bridge it all that well. They tried at the very end. Maybe they got a plank of wood down on that bridge, but it didn't necessarily span over like they were hoping it would. And it is really just a one-sided conversation. It's an easy fix, I think, to really put your prospect first and stop using so much I, we, our language and start injecting them into the conversation and really focusing the message on them as someone reading your email. But it's also really easy to just totally forget about them and copy paste some stuff from your website and this is what you get. So it's a fickle sword, double-edged sword, fickle double-edged sword. Coining it now, it's a phrase.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it can be fixed. And I think that's the beauty of copywriting is really if you do have a value prop behind a product that's real and that you can you can sell, you can always take messaging and just translate it from like an I focus mindset or maybe like kind of going into marketing pitch to more of a, we focus mindset or you focus mindset and kind of approaching it like a conversation rather than a marketing landing page. And another point I wanted to make here is beyond the kind of value prop disconnect and kind of not bridging the intro through to the CTA. I think another issue with this middle section here, and this is a problem that I think a lot of salespeople do, and they don't realize it, but even if we assume all of this is banger, even if we assume every sentence in this email is just amazing, it's influential, it's gonna change the minds of buyers, even with all of that, every additional sentence, every additional piece of information, every variable, everything that you add to a buyer's plate to think about decreases the overall impact of the email. Mm-hmm. And so I would say kind of going beyond just the structure of the email as a whole, when you're wanting to present the part that is talking about you, when you're trying to say, we do this, we are XYZ, we help these companies do this, you want to be as tight as possible and you want to get to the point because you want it to be memorable. What you don't want to do is for recipients to just auto skim your emails because they're either too complicated or too wordy to begin with, and then that creates a gap and misunderstanding between a buyer and a seller. So get to the point, focus on what's most valuable and relevant for this specific email you're sending. And you can always, like we've talked about in past episodes, you can always take the stuff you didn't include in that email and sprinkle it in for other emails, for follow-ups, for nurture emails. I think this email alone, if we change nothing else but maybe removed a few sentences in the middle, I think that in itself would have improved the readability of this email. And at the very least, I think it would have gotten to the point faster. That doesn't necessarily mean that it would have been more influential, but it would have gotten to the point faster, which means that buyers would have been able to either say yes or no in their minds faster.
Yeah, would have been painless, or more painless for sure. No, but you bring up a good point, and it's by no means like written in stone, but there's a bunch of research out there that, if your email is between, I think it's 70 and 150 words, you have a much higher chance at, just in general, having a more positive response to it. It's, again, not a hard and fast rule. You're just giving yourself a better opportunity by sort of limiting what you're saying. And to your point, Grayson, if you can really tighten up that value prop and sort of like this is why I'm reaching out to you specifically portion of your message, and have your email cut down so that it's a bit more readable, it's shorter, it gets to that point faster, then you're going to give yourself a better chance at getting a response. Longer emails, especially if your prospects are reading them on their phones, they're going to skim it, like you were saying. So you really have to like think about everything when you're writing a cold email. I have to have a tight value prop. It needs to be the right length. I need to bring my prospect into the fold. It's not, as the writer of this email said, it's nothing fancy here. It is kind of fancy. Like, you have to think about all of these things as moving parts if you really want someone to respond positively to your message. I would also like to point out the dichotomy there where they said there's nothing fancy here, and then in the next paragraph they say there's a lot to it, which I just find very funny.
Yeah, to kind of touch on that a little bit, I think there's a lot of wording here that I think shouldn't have been used, and kind of as like a shoot yourself in the foot type of situation, where when you're dealing with a service, like, products are one thing. If you have a low value product, sometimes it's as easy as sending an email, getting the click to convert, and then actually getting the sale on the website. But most B2B deals, it requires at least a conversation and a sign off from at least one human, like one person. And so you're wanting to keep in mind that future you're going to have to go through. It's kind of like the opposite of the problem we just talked about, right? Where they think it's going to be a magic bullet to get them to the meeting. Well, a lot of people also kind of forget that it's not a magic bullet once you've gotten to a meeting. You still have to nurture, you still have to build momentum. You might even need to deal with other stakeholders to get to the end of the deal. And so what you say at any given point is very important. Like, the confidence that you build throughout the deal with every person that you're interacting with is key. And so, kind of going back to what you said, AJ, the words, there's nothing fancy here, there's a lot to it. Well, first of all, those two completely contradictory. So that's confusion, which we talked about confusion. You don't want buyers to be confused, you want buyers to be curious. But then two, it's kind of like they're undercutting or overemphasizing their service in the wrong ways on two different fronts. So it's like, there's nothing fancy here. So they're trying to say like, we could do this for you. We can do this for anybody.
No problem.
Right. But it comes off as, there's nothing really that we're doing here. We're not differentiated, is how it comes off to someone like you and me, because we know how competitive this space is. We know it's all about the brand and the team and what you can show in terms of outcomes.
And to be frank, how not easy it is. Like, in no way, shape, or form have I ever come across a service like this where they're providing booked meetings on someone's calendar that is simple. There's so much nuance to the industry itself that, like you were saying before, it's not a simple SaaS product where you could possibly just buy it with one click. Like, you have to talk to a ton of people. This is typically a very big decision that a company makes, and trying to boil it down to something this easy is almost like offensive.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other thoughts you want to add to the original, or should we move on to the rewrite?
I did have a question for you, and this is, I guess, a question for the audience as well. But they mention in that as you called it, barf paragraph in the middle there, the words substantial ROI, and then they didn't back it up with any numbers. So I'm wondering, first of all, are you a fan of including any kind of like ROI based numbers in that first sort of cold email? And then if you aren't, which I'm personally not a fan of either, why?
So I'm going to give you a depends. It depends answer. And then the reason why is because it all depends on exactly how your buyer's process works for purchasing and how exactly your sales process works for closing. So for certain products, right? Like for instance, data providers, this idea of ROI, what that really comes down to is what's the quality?
Mhm.
How often is it updated? What data points can you provide? And in that industry, you have to almost show that up front. And
Okay.
so it's almost like the foot in the door to get a purchase in that industry is to show, quote, the value or the return you would get. Because look, this is real data. Look at the quality. Here's the tests.
Right.
But in other industries, it kind of doesn't make sense, right? Like for an SEO agency, like you can't go to every single prospect that you're selling to and show them an ROI calculation and it makes sense for their
Right.
situation. They might be smaller, they might be bigger, they might be using SEO for B2B, where the other one was using it for consumer conversion. So there's all these different things. And what I will say is this substantial ROI phrase is a future state phrase. It is used to visualize and give kind of a light at the end of the tunnel for
Mhm.
prospects.
All the
And
money.
yes, and it goes back to a point that I made earlier of you want to build curiosity, not confusion. And through the context of this email, if you are reaching out to somebody who in the original email he says that he's reaching out to a marketing and an advertising agency, right? If
Mhm.
you're reaching out to somebody in the marketing advertising agency, they will know what's going on, at least somewhat, with how marketing, how advertising, how sales, how general customer acquisition works. And so you need to speak in their language in
Mhm.
order to build curiosity. Because if you don't, if they don't get it, then they're confused. If they don't get it because they think you don't get it, they think you're confused.
Yeah.
And so the way that you frame the future state is very important. So if you're going to say something like meaning substantial ROI, be specific to the way that your persona wants it to be. If you're
Right.
reaching out to an SEO agency, what does substantial ROI translate to? If you're reaching out to a call center, that'll probably be different. And so I really think it's not about whether or not to bring up an ROI. It's about how you frame it in the context of the recipient. I think many people kind of they blanket statement the future states just like they do the value prop. They say we help companies do X, Y, Z, leading to the same benefit I'm going to send to the next recipient, right? Like they don't personalize it enough.
Yeah, it's almost like a crutch that you can lean on where you're like, wow, this number is, I don't know, 265%. That's amazing, right? And it's like, okay, but like doesn't really mean a whole lot to me if you don't give me context. So I like that answer. I agree with you.
Yes, awesome. Cool. Okay, so let's move on to my rewrite here. So this one is one that I did, and I tried to keep it real short,
It
real
is
small,
beautiful small.
for a specific reason. Yeah, it's hard to see. So let me read it real quick. Hi, Grayson. Does your company accept referrals? I know a few businesses that could be a fit for your agency over the next 6 to 12 months. So I wanted to connect about the qualification criteria your company uses to source great clients. Would you be open to a conversation?
Wow. Yeah, totally different tune. And this, I think, addresses like the biggest point of that first email where the prospect was just a bystander up until the end of that first email. The prospect is the focal point of this one, where it's like, do you accept referrals? I know a few businesses that could be a fit for your agency. I want to talk about your qualification criteria. You're enveloping the prospect in the process throughout the entire email versus this is what we do, you want some? That's a totally different tune. And obviously, it's way shorter, more succinct. You're providing value right up front. I like this email a lot more.
Awesome. Yeah, my thinking behind this email is my big issue with the original was that magic bullet problem. I feel
Yeah.
like they tried to make the sale an instant conversion with one email. And what I tried to show is there are so many ways that you can get conversations or quote conversions into the
Mhm.
sales funnel without having to be so direct and without having to jump the gun so hard and say, hey, are you middle or bottom of funnel or should I treat you differently? Right? Like it's a little aggressive. So instead, what I said is, listen, if I'm dealing with, and I'm thinking about my market here, the persona we're looking at, if I'm dealing with leaders in marketing and advertising agencies, and the reason why I'm wanting to reach out to them is to help them get new business, well, let's break that down. Do they need new business? Are they growing? That's something I don't know. How do they source new business? That's something I also don't know. Do they even source business externally? And so I kind of went through this thought train, and the kind of point I came to is, okay, if I tried to go as far back to the beginning of a sales process as I could to ensure that I'm starting as many conversations as possible with who I consider marketing qualified, right? They're worth the budget to go after, spend some budget to get them up. So if I can find that point right there, my hypothesis, and this is, I always do testing, but my hypothesis here is that maybe if I just start by saying, hey, how do you source your leads? Rather than saying, hey, I can source leads to you and I think you do it and we could be an asset for you. It gives prospects so much freedom and control to self-identify where they want to start. And I think overall, I think salespeople kind of, this is a big battle, I think, between buyers, salespeople, and sales leaders and organizations, to where the sales organization wants salespeople to be very efficient, spend as little time as possible with the wrong deals, and then convert as quickly as possible the right deals. And buyers just aren't for that. Some are when you're in market, when you have an urgent problem, or if you're just so experienced dealing with salespeople, it's whatever. But for the most part, buyers want to go at their own pace. Buyers are discovering things at their own pace. They're learning about things at their own will, and they're also discovering their own use cases for your solution. I think salespeople forget that it's the buyers who have to go through the process to actually close. While you have your checkboxes, while you have your sales stages that they need to go through, it's the buyers who lead the salespeople through that. It's not the other way around. You can't force a buyer through message after message to convert across a stage if they're not ready. And so what I tried to do here, and I'm going to let you talk because I've been talking too much, AJ, but what I tried to do here is really find the best starting point to create a conversation that is valuable, but still relevant to what I'm wanting to get to at the end.
That's, a great point. I think, like you said, buyers, kind of drive the ship, so to speak. But at the same time, you as a seller need to guide them. So you can't be totally irrelevant in this process. Buyers are going to come in at the top of the funnel, somewhere in the middle of the funnel, closer to the bottom of the funnel. You don't know where this person is. So if you take your advice, Grayson, and you kind of set it up so that doesn't matter where they are in the funnel, if you pick a logical starting point to guide them from where you are, then you hit everybody. Rather than in that first email, they're grabbing low-hanging fruit. They're trying to find someone who's like ready to move forward. They've been thinking about this, situations like that. So you made a point about magic bullets and how they don't really work. I think in this situation, what you've done, and I've heard this quote a lot recently, is you've used one of the lead bullets that you have, which is a consistent, repeatable, predictable process that you can do as a seller to drive pipeline, pull people into your funnel. A lot of reps get sort of, they look at this magic bullet opportunity, an email that they think can convert a bunch of people without having to put a lot of effort into. And over time, they realize that, like, hey, this isn't going to work. But you've kind of wasted some of the lead bullets that you have in your chamber to send this magic bullet out there. So in this situation, you've used something that you could use for any number of prospects, putting yourself in a situation where you can pinpoint an area that logically makes sense as a starting point, helping that seller or helping that buyer then guide them through the process of learning more about your company, the value you can provide, really bringing them into the conversation, being the delta, like we talked about before, of letting them know how you can help them achieve their goals. And then at their pace, kind of working with them to move down the funnel, rather than kind of just firing off one bullet, hoping everything works out, moving on to the next person. It's more work, but at the end of the day, you're going to see better results from it.
Right. Yeah, I do want to throw out one big caveat, and I think this is actually be a good kind of discussion to wrap up on, since we have two different perspectives on it. But I think that this is not always the best idea, depending on what type of company you are and what you're selling. And the reason why is because while this will get more responses than the original email because it's not as sales focused, it's not as dry and automated looking. This email will be harder to get to a meeting. And why? Because it's more open-ended and it takes a rep with more experience to be able to navigate a starting point like this in a conversation to get it to that next stage. And I think this is one of the reasons why sales emails are so direct for larger companies, is because companies often don't spend enough time to train reps and get them to be as good as they can be. And so they have to work with the skills and the resources and the tools that they have available to them, which often means emails like this that can't be their starting point, because
Right.
they would have to get trained on how to actually do this. And so I want to hear your thoughts as someone who leads marketing and customer acquisition for a company in this space, but on a larger scale. I think it'd be interesting to hear your opinion, because I'm from startup world. You are in a different space, and I'm curious.
No, I think you bring up a really good point. There's like a big difference between seeing someone who has a bit of industry or subject matter expertise writing an email versus someone who doesn't. And you're right, the people who don't lean on the things that are available to them, which aren't a lot. But the big differentiator between the two is experience. I've run into a bunch of different situations where you ask a rep like, hey, what's the biggest roadblock that you have to booking more meetings, seeing more deals come into the pipeline? Is it tools? Is it resource? Like, what can I give you? And 99% of the time, the answers that we're getting are time. I just need more time to understand the space, the personas I'm reaching out to, the industry overall, what my competitors look like. That's something that you can't just give somebody. They have to kind of learn and grow over time. Um, I've written about this in the past, but I look at sort of being a sales development rep, like putting together a puzzle. And at the beginning, you don't really have any pieces and you don't know what the end puzzle looks like. But over time, you have more phone conversations, you get more emails back, you learn more about the space, and the pieces start to materialize in front of you, and you put it together in a way that makes sense for you. But that you can't just get the pieces; like they have to be presented to you over time. So that's a situation where I think that like the person sending this email has to have that subject matter expertise, some industry knowledge, and it's something that you can't just achieve in maybe 3 months after like a training and onboarding program. Um, those are my thoughts on it. I also would love to point out real quick, the opening to your email here is spot on, because find me a company that doesn't accept referrals. Like that, I don't know. It's really hard to like see that and think, does your company accept referrals? And it's like, well, of course I accept referrals. And you put them into a great state of mind immediately, like right off the bat with this email. They're thinking yes, not, oh, another sales email, another rep trying to reach out to me, sell me something. Like, no, thanks. It's
Oh, looks like we might have lost
this
AJ.
email.
Oh, he's back.
Oh man, was I frozen? I was making such a good point. Oh, looks like you guys are never gonna find out what I was talking. No. Where did I cut off? I can summarize what I said real quick.
Yeah, could you just start over?
Yes. So the beginning of your email was spot on, because you put someone into a good mood and you've piqued their curiosity like immediately. Like, do you accept referrals? Like, dude, of course I accept referrals. I'm a business. I'm trying to make money. And then it's like, why is this person asking if I accept referrals? Do they have a referral for me? Now I'm curious. I want to read more about this person who's got these mysterious referrals. They're going to help me find new business, which is great. So I'm in a good mood and I'm curious about what they're actually trying to talk about. So the way you opened up the email, I thought was really smart. And maybe something that like a newer SDR doesn't necessarily know or have the experience to navigate like an opening of an email like this.
Yeah, I will say that it's towing the line a little bit on the kind of manipulation thing. And I went ahead and went with it because if you are going to lead with an email like this and you're in the space you're in, you told us that you've helped for 5 years source venture-backed companies and help them grow business. So it's like, you should have the network and you should have
Right.
the authority to be able to at least follow through on something like this in 6 to 12 months. So like, if you can't give a single referral to a high value prospect that's going to be like more than 50,000 ACV in 12 months, then you're probably not going to be the best service provider for them. And so that's the only caveat, is like, this could be seen as manipulative if salespeople aren't prepared to follow through with this next step that they've set up here. And that's, I think, would be the last thing that I'd leave with everyone, is like, when you set up things like this, it's really creative. It can create responses, but this does take more upfront work, because you're queuing off a custom next step to get them onboarded into a sales process. You're saying, hey, do you accept referrals? Because if so, we can get to talking about that, and maybe even I'll give you a referral while I figure out where you are in the buying process and where I need to put you.
Yeah,
it does look like we're at the top of the hour. So for everybody who joined us today, thank you so much. This will be up on YouTube later, so make sure to hit subscribe, smash the like button. Join us next week, every Monday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. We've been bringing on a lot more guests, and we might have another one on next week. So stay tuned.
Rumor has it that you guys will have another guest, and by rumor I mean my scheduling ability.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for everyone who joined us. If you have an email that you want to show us, or you want reviewed, or if you want to join us on the show to go check out an email and rewrite it, let us know. Connect with AJ, myself, or Austin Fuller, and we'll get something scheduled.
Awesome. This was fun. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.